Should we talk newspapers now? Should we talk about your bank holiday newspapers? Let's talk to Eric Wiltsher, who's with us this morning on The Breakfast Show here at Talk TV. Welcome along.
How are you, young man?
Oh, well, listen, if you start like that, you're in. You're signed up, mate. How are you?
Well,
what's going on? Where are you, by the way?
I'm actually in a town called Poprad, which is about 30 minutes from the Ukraine border in Slovakia.
Is it really?
Yes.
When you go out into your garden or into your street, how far away are you from the war action? Do you ever hear any collateral? Do you hear any of this?
I've only heard it when I've been to the border, Johnny.
Right.
And the reason I've been to the border is to help refugees come across. And I'm not looking for a halo, it doesn't count. It's just helping people. But I think the most pertinent point to what you're asking is how people react.
Yes.
And when you live, as I do now, with expat Ukrainians, the one thing that's absolutely true in the UK media is the Ukrainians do not give up. They're a very strong, robust group of people. By the same token, you have one young lady and her husband, a little boy of 3. They had a tremendous business in the Ukraine, doing all sorts of housing projects. They went from 60 employees to nothing overnight. And that was in Kyiv itself. When you go further east to, as some of the charity groups that we help here, they go right out almost to the Donbass region, and it is incredibly scary what you're told from people who are actually on the front line. I speak to one gentleman from an organisation called Charity, and it's a Catholic charity, and they are constantly having to do things. And I think the worst thing is they raise money for things like ambulances, and believe it or not, governments charge them for second-hand ambulances. It's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. So it's scary, but we are resilient here.
Yes.
The backbone of the Brits stays strong.
Well, that's good to hear. Eric, I want to ask you about Slovakia in relation to the Ukraine. We hear about Moldova, the threat. It's not a big country. It's got a population of less than 1 million. It's very invadable next to the Ukraine and by Russia. We hear about Belarus, which is effectively a satellite nation of Russia and being used in the war effort against Ukraine. But there are plenty of other countries that border Ukraine. One of them is your own Slovakia. Because Slovakia is not under the same threat as Belarus and Moldova, and even Finland, of course, who have joined NATO this week because they are scared of invasion, and it increases that border with Russia. The NATO border with Russia now increases significantly. How has it affected peacetime Slovakia? What is the mood in Slovakia, considering all the Ukrainians which have arrived in the country?
On one side, it's very, very scary. I mean, you're just about to have the test for an emergency in the UK. However, we constantly have them. It's something that goes back to the old days. And you hear these air raid sirens go off, and all of a sudden you're going, ouch, is it for real? Is it a test? And people are nervous about it. But they are Slavic, like the Ukrainians, and they go, well, we're not letting him have anything back anymore. We had years of that. It's not going to happen. And you can see that when people observe and they watch and they listen to huge convoys of armament going down what's called the D1 motorway, or colloquially known as the European motorway. Going to the border, it comes about 5 miles from my house. And these things trundle down. Then you get these huge aircraft landing at our airport to unload armament under the NATO flag, for sure, but they're American huge aircraft.
Yes.
And in fact, they make the floor judder underneath you. It's so strong.
Yeah.
And people on one side, absolutely vehement, nothing will come here. You do have a tiny minority of people who still think the old days were better. And I classify that as old Slovakia rather than young Slovakia.
Yes.
And the young Slovakians, there is no way on planet Earth will they let Mr. Putin come back. But they are still slightly nervous, as you'd expect. And when you have news of rockets going to somewhere they shouldn't, where the Russians keep screwing up, it automatically hits the newspapers and the TV news.
Yes, it makes people scary. I mean, there is a definitely a generational difference between the young and the old as well in Ukraine. We keep hearing that. Eric, to the stories that you've picked today from our papers. Suella Braverman, she blasts the police for sending 5 officers to seize the collection of Golly dolls from family pubs, as Home Office source warns they shouldn't be involved in this nonsense. Political correctness gone mad.
Absolutely. It's rather like, I used to have a Facebook page, a comedy page, which was slightly risque, and on there we had a Golly doll, and the Golly doll was sitting in a hedge. I had heck's own trouble with Facebook.
Right.
I was banned. And I said, why? They said, it's racially prejudiced.
Right.
I said, a child's doll is racially prejudiced? My little sister loved her black baby doll.
Yeah.
Is that wrong?
Yeah.
And to have the police waste their time...
It's terrible, man, isn't it?
...over such an incident beggars belief. When you have real crime on the streets, you have knife crime, you have gun crime, you have every other crime going, and they waste their time going to a Golly doll?
It's crazy, isn't it? And I must say, since my childhood, I've got these little sort of China Gollies, which were Robertson Jam brand. Do you remember?
Yes,
I used to collect them, right? And I've got them in my house. And when PC sort of came around in the early 80s, it was explained to me that they were African or they were black people. I had absolutely no idea. I never even thought for one moment those little China characters were black or white. They were just like little animals. I thought that's what this was.
Yes.
You know, in the way that you don't racialise a black cat or a white cat for their fur.
No.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, the funny thing is that on a regular basis, we have Manchester United Academy come here for training.
Right.
Now, the young kids here have never seen a black person.
Right.
There are none.
Yeah.
And I won't say the word because everybody will get upset and complain to Ofcom, but the descriptive noun for a black person in the UK would be abhorrent to some people in the PC correct world.
Yes.
And I go and talk to the players.
And most people in society as well.
Yes.
You don't have to.
And I go to the players, the black ones, and I say, look, guys, if one of the little kids calls you that, it's not racist. That is the noun for you.
Right.
And they go, really? Yes.
Eric, more chat in just a moment. More from you in just a second. Eric Wiltsher's here, Talk TV. Speak to you in a sec. Having a ball on early breakfast. Peter Cardwell is here from 6:30, standing in for Julia on this bank holiday Easter Monday day. You're welcome to join us. 0344 499 1000. Eric Wiltsher is reviewing the papers. Eric, your second story is, quotes, misjudged Sunak assault should serve as a reminder to refocus on core Labour values. What doubt?
Well, that was a shock to the system. Because believe it or not, it was in the Daily Mirror.
Right.
Which I don't read. The Daily Mirror, for them to actually stand up and say what the Labour Party is doing today is basically allowing the Tories to win by default. And they are scared of that. And it's quite apparent in the article itself, where they're saying, go back to core values and stop doing dirty politics.
So this is my question, which we kicked off the show. Are we...
Correct.
Is it, productive or counterproductive to talk about negative campaigning? And, of course, this is the story we're talking about, where Keir Starmer's taken the battle to the centre-right by writing a very, very big article on page 5. Rishi Sunak and the Tories have let criminals get away with it. I stand by every word Labour has said, no matter how squeamish some may feel. And there's that little advert you just see at the bottom. I know it's a bit small, but basically the text of the advert, Eric, is, do you think adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison? Rishi Sunak doesn't. OK, so, this is an attack ad. So the Daily Mirror, what you're saying is that they're going against... This is like a gimme, should we say, to the Tories winning the next election. That comes from the Mirror. It's like
absolutely.
A warning.
And when the Mirror, we know, you and I have been in this long enough, they are biased towards the Labour Party. When they turn against their own party, that says a lot, Johnny. And let's face it, you and I have both walked in the same halls, and yet we don't necessarily, well, I do a bit, attack the BBC for what they're doing. We both walked in Bush House. We've both been there, but we don't go around just attacking them to try and win some arguments.
No.
We would attack them if they're making a mistake, not just a silly argument.
Yes.
And I honestly think Keir Starmer's made a huge mistake.
Yes, OK. So... Daily, I mean, you get advice from your best friends, don't you? Do you think they'll look at the media? And, I mean, the media is not as powerful in terms of newspapers as it was.
Nowhere near.
Do you think they'll take that advice, or will he just keep going?
I think they'll keep going. And when you have Keir Starmer actually saying they stand by everything, that shows you where his stance is on politics.
Yes.
And that worries me immensely for the UK. And I know I've lived in Slovakia 20 years and I have Slovak ID and all the rest of it, but I still worry about my mother country. Of course I do. My kids are there. And so, when you get to this gutter politics, which is worse than PMQs, which I now today struggle to watch because it's, well, I don't know what it is. It's not PMQs. You think to yourself, what on earth is happening to the UK? And the second question I raise to myself is, how does the UK go back to being sensible, to being honest, to being factual? Because we have too much fiction rather than facts, Johnny.
Yeah, we live in a post-truth age, and I don't think that's just a problem with Britain. That is an issue which is something that we have to attack and deal with across the whole of the Western world. We were talking quite some detail about Ukraine earlier on. Now, Ukraine's air defences could soon run out of missiles. This is an apparent leak from the Pentagon. Is this true?
This is a mistake where somebody's put some document out. I don't know if this is actually true or it could be planned misinformation.
Yes.
Because we know Putin's up for anything like that. And if it is that he decides he can make some kind of posturing about it, he will do it to his inner sanctum. What I would say, Johnny, is the regular Russian people are actually brainwashed by him. And yet there are huge numbers of Russian people that I speak to regularly, too afraid to say anything, but they don't believe in the war at all. Not at all. Absolutely not. So I'm half of me says, yeah, it could be true, which means will all the governments please help a lot more? And yet we saw President Zelensky in Poland last week actually being told he's getting everything. So maybe it's a bit of a game of chess going on at the moment, and that's really just to put Putin off the scent.
Information and misinformation, a part of the dialogue of war. Eric Wiltsher, thank you very much for helping us through the papers this morning. I've had an absolute ball, and all I was the tee-up for the big breakfast show coming up after 6:30 with Peter Cardwell.